Yes, so we're going to take a look at something different today. We're going to look at English language and literature history. And we're going to start with this one, English language history. So as it works now, this language we speak now, the modern English, has developed a lot over the last 100 years, and that's quite interesting actually to see how it was before and how it has developed to what we speak now. English, as we have here in the red circle, is of course a Germanic language compared to much like most Latin languages. We can see that this Germanic language has, for example, developed into North Germanic, into Swedish, and then to West Germanic, where we have, of course, German and also British. So the history of English started with around the 5th century. Here we have a map of Europe. We have Britain here to the left, and it started with basically Vikings from what we say is current day Denmark. Here we have the tribes or families which was called Jutes, Angles and Saxons, and they traveled west with their Viking boats over the North Sea, and they traveled to Britain, where they killed, plundered and so on the population that lived there, and then they basically decided, so yeah, this is a good place to stay, so they decided to live here. And they and with this migration, they also come a change in language. So this is where we get to see the current some current signs of how English will be in the future. And this is what we call Old English. And here we have an example of this. This is from 450 to 1100 AD, and this is after Christ. And on the left hand side we have the Old English text, and then the right side we have the modern translation. So this is the old religious text, Our Father who are in heaven. And if you say it in Old English, it will sound something like Fader ure, aute art on henum, se din nama gehelgod to bekomme din rike, gewurde din villa. So we can see some signs even of some Swedish words here. For example, villa, your will, or din vilja, and so on. So it's but of course also very difficult to understand, especially if you don't pronounce it in the right way. If you just read it, it's very strange. And this was until 1100s, and then we moved on to Battle of Hastings in 1066. This is the invasion from what we call France today, which we have William. He basically invades Britain today from the south, and they started with the Battle of Hastings down here, and then they traveled up north and then back south again. And and they also settled down, and let's say the ruling elite thought of French as something positive, and with this come a lot of change also to the language. A lot of French words or words which comes from France in a way was introduced into the English vocabulary. And we have a little example of this too. This is from I think this is from the beginning of Canterbury Tales, a poem. When in April the sweet showers fall. So then the right hand side we have the modern translation, and on the left hand side we can see that the English language has once again developed or changed. When Fat April with his shores såte, Pedrote av Marche has perced to the rote. This is some attempt of my part to speak Middle English, but we can see it's very different from Old English, and also very different from modern English. And then we come to this guy, of course, Shakespeare. When was he around? He is, well, around these years, 1564 to 1616, and of course this is after Middle English. It's not Old English, it's not Middle English, but this is actually early modern English. And if we, well, of course, if we would read a text from Shakespeare in the original versions, it would still be pretty difficult to understand sometimes what they're saying, which also kind of shows how much the English language has developed over the last few years. And I must say, have to say that too, that the English language is still developing to this day. We are constantly getting new phrases and grammar and words and so on, and and pronunciation, of course. And then we come to literature history. We will look at 5 different time periods when it comes to English, well, books. And we start with the first one, the Middle Ages. We start, roughly after the Old English invasion here, around 1900s to 1500s. Of course, AD, after the birth of Christ. And Christ is a very important figure here. The church is very important. We have knights, the god and the royal family is very well connected here. Of course, we know that the king is anointed by God. He has directly connected with God, saying this is the king, is the right king for your country, and so on. We also have bad times during this time. We have the plague and so on. A lot of people die during this time. So it's and of course this also is obvious in the literature from this time. It's a lot of epic battles and sad literature from these sad times too. And of course a lot of importance with the church and so on. Religious text is very important here. And then much later comes the Renaissance, around the 15 to 1600s, and here we have a growing interest in science, and also that we think that the ideals from ancient Rome and Romans and Greek is very important. And with this also comes, of course, a change in how what books we read and what books were written during that time. We think that we don't always have to look to God to find the truth. We can use our reasoning and our minds to find what we want. And as a reaction to this, in the 17 to 1800s, it's very Practical that they kind of come around the same hundreds when we change year here. Here comes the Age of Enlightenment, and it's still, a critique to the church and God. We think that we don't necessarily need God that much. We have an emancipation. We try to move away from God or the church in a way, and we fight for the rights of the individual. And the society doesn't necessarily have to be ruled by God or the king anymore. And of course, this also is something we can see in the books written from this time. And then, as I said, reaction to this comes the Romantic period from the 1800s to the 1900s. We think that maybe we can't explain everything with science. Maybe there has to be some part of in our lives for love and mystery. So of course, if you can see from the title to the Romantic period, we have many of the works, the great works from or love stories is written during this time. So emotions is very important here. Discussion, less important. And then finally, from the 1800s to the 1900s, we have realism and naturalism. And this comes from the time we have the industrialization or the revolution here, with a lot of factories and machines and different way on how we work and how we live and so on. And of course, With this comes also urbanization, that we move into the cities and away from the fields as farmers in some ways. And then this also changes a little bit what we read and what we write, what was written during that time as well.